I can hear laughter and the sound of leaves cracking under my feet. With every step I take, the ground is soft and tugs at my feet playfully. I feel warmth on my eyelids and hear a whisper begin in my ear. Almost there, my princess. Everything is right, but they take away their hands and I feel a blast of cold air slap me. When I look around, I find black, black, black. My tears are flooding, and I start to think I'll never return to the light, but the laughter starts back up from somewhere above me, and it's getting closer. It's a tight space, but the darkness is slipping away in my tears, and I'm no longer stuck as I try to swim towards the laughter. Try to twist around and shout their names, but I'm twisting too fast. Suddenly I've emerged, but now it's almost as black as from below. This black isn't like the darkness still trying to soil me, clinging to me. This black has been burned. Suddenly sensitive, I see a ball of light, but it's coming too quickly towards me. I don't remember ever coming so close to the sun or this heat. Something is cracking, and it's me. The darkness falls off of me. With all this heat, I should be sweating, but it's all too clear I'm not what I used to be. The ball of light falls past me to the ground. Considering the falling leaves, stealing their colors, I cannot cough anymore either, and the smoke stings. I'm spineless, but rising up past the smoke. I'm not the only thing that has changed. My parents are dragons, and they rush at me, but plants and green cannot scream. They steal a fruit I hadn't known I had grown, and their claws pierce it as they fight for it. I can only watch as it's tossed in the air, only to be consumed by fire. They continue to fight, and before I know what's happened, they've broken me, and I'm falling down to earth.
Natasha, what's wrong?
I'm sorry I woke you up, Teresa.
Do you want to talk about it?
I'm too cold.
I could get us both some hot apple cider from inside if that would help.
I'll be fine. It was just a typical nightmare about monsters, dragons.
I'm glad that's all.
Teresa's not usually up this early, so she won't mind. Is there any way you could avoid telling my parents about the shoes? Okay. But the shoes might take a little while to dry. Just in case they're still damp when the time rolls around for your parents to pick you up, I could call and ask them if you could stay a little while longer. Thanks. Teresa told me what a wonderful writer you are, and from what I've heard, you, like her, are interested in going to the playwright camp happening soon, but you're scared. I don't know if my parents will be doing something then or not. Surely they'd love for you to go, wouldn't they? My writing style is different from theirs. Is it something they love about you, or do you really enjoy it? It's rewarding to just get something out that's been in my head. Well, it sounds like it's a really good outlet for you. I hope you'll get to go to the camp. I hope so too. Maybe in the summer months we could really take you with us camping. Do you think that would be okay with your parents? That would be wonderful. The way that Teresa's parents act when she spills popcorn versus the way my parents react over any of my mistakes, I have to admit I'm sometimes a little jealous of Teresa, the closeness of her family. She once told me she had to admit she was a little jealous of me because I've seen so much of the world. What she doesn't know is the beauty of any place you can go can be robbed in a moment if the person you share it with is a critic. There's a kissing scene, and I can't bring myself to watch it. Teresa can because she still believes true love exists. It's not that I don't want to hope, but I grew out of hoping for it to happen to me a long time ago. Besides, I'm the kind of person who would get crushed in a relationship. I just know it. I don't like the idea of losing yourself for someone else. Why does it bother me so much anyway? I'm not in love. April mentions the camp, and I wish she wouldn't, because now I have a mix of feelings as I will myself to look up into my parents' eyes. I wish she'd let me hope for a moment. What if my parents were to let me go, and it's wonderful, but we have to leave right after? If that happened, at least I'd have something good to remember when I'm going through rough times. Then it would be like the promises I make to myself when something is so incredibly funny that I'll never forget it. I always tell myself, as long as I can remember that, I'll never cry again. What really happens is that the laughter turns dark. It overtakes me and becomes something as painful and irrepressible as tears. Sometimes I find myself longing for someone I can cry in front of without feeling naked. If my mom or dad ask me what's wrong when they catch me crying, it feels useless to tell them. That they have to even ask shows they don't know me. Maybe they're just out of touch with the terrible things they've said to me. My mom reminds me we're going on a vacation soon and asks if I forgot that, but even if Teresa or her family heard the sarcasm in her tone, it's too late now. Vacation with my parents means relocation. In the ride home, my parents are telling me where we're moving and when. I have to act enthusiastic to avoid a fight, but internally, I've already begun planning my way out. It's been a few months since the night my parents told me their plans for leaving in 2 days' time. What they don't know is that I'm leaving tomorrow before they awake. I still have money from past holidays and birthdays saved up. I don't know how long I'll be able to use it, but I have to at least try. I've written Teresa and her family a letter, which I've already asked one of their neighbors to deliver for me when I'm sure that they won't be able to track me. Earlier today, April called and asked my mom if she could pay for me to go to that camp with Teresa. My mom explained why I can't go, that we're going on a vacation. I should probably stop writing this for now. I have to get up before they do tomorrow, or all my plans will go to waste. Good night, journal. The train stations are always a little different, but my parents never change. They have an insatiable hunger for anything new, but something seems to follow us, so they're unsettled anywhere. Dings and dents in furniture or on the walls start to accumulate, and only when any new home becomes too expressive, only then do they say how much they just can't bear staying any longer. They're always running from memories by making more. I've wanted one thing for years, a promise. They've had their chance to promise me that things will be different. They will be different, but I've waited long enough. What I do now is up to me. What I have is my brain, and it will no longer go silent. I can write. I will do everything to keep it from being trapped on paper. I have a plan to unleash my wildest hopes and dreams, I promise. Love, Natasha. There's a girl who has been traveling with me on the train, and it feels like we've been traveling for weeks. Though it couldn't have been more than a few days ago we met. Could it? I don't know much about her yet. From what I can tell of her, she's like a crumpled piece of paper. Someone has tried to crush her. You can see the damage just from the expressions on her face. I can feel so much discomfort and stress coming off of her sometimes. I know I'll have to be careful as I try to relax her wrinkled edges so nothing I ask tears her apart. Whoever has tried to break her spirit hasn't succeeded. After all, she is here with me, traveling. There are moments when the light shines in and she softens completely. Then I can feel the hope she radiates, and I know then, though she's still shy, something in her wants her wise from me. Why is she alone? Since she chose me, out of anyone she could have chosen on the train to travel with her, why does she wish to pretend I'm her brother? Why did she choose me to travel with her? I'm free for her whenever she's ready to tell me. I can feel her pain, and I want nothing more than to take all her emotional pain away forever. Today I asked her why she's not traveling with her parents. She told me all about them. My mom told my teacher one day we were just leaving for a while, and then we were gone. We never looked back. 3 years later, we had to leave the place we left for. We never returned. They've been grown since I can remember, but they don't see the lessons I've learned. I feel old. I've learned to say I love them, but I know that's not what they really want me to tell them. They want to hear that I need them because they don't care about me. They only care about the power they gain over me. I need to leave them, but the only thing I hate is leaving my only friend. Yes, every time we've moved, I've made friends. The only thing I hate about this is leaving my friend Teresa, without knowing if I'll ever get a chance to see her again. I always wait too late to find the courage to tell friends. I don't want them to pity me, or think they need to save me. I thought I wanted to be rescued for a while, but if I had wanted that, I wouldn't have kept my mouth shut. You had the courage to tell me, and you know what? I don't pity you. You had the strength to rescue yourself, so you don't need to keep your mouth shut with me. You still haven't even told me your name. It's Natasha. It's Natasha. You mean you're Natasha. I'm Drew. You told me, remember? Have we met before, by any chance? The day we met was cold, but deceptively bright. I had just woken from a nap on the train. It felt like it couldn't have lasted more than 5 minutes or so, but it was clear I'd missed my stop. I felt disoriented when I looked around, unable to recognize the faces of any of the passengers sitting around me. The vibe I felt coming off them had a generalized boredom to it. Among them, one stood out, emitting an intensely desperate yearning. I felt it like a lump in my own throat as I glanced around, searching the eyes and postures of those around me. I found the source within minutes. From a girl who was seated almost directly across from me. She was asleep, but there was a look to her swollen, tightly shut eyes that indicated she hadn't slept in a while. Her head hung almost sorrowfully above a barely exposed shoulder. Her hair was dangling down as if in an attempt to mask it. I couldn't help but notice the greenish-yellow cast to her unveiled skin, a half-uncovered bruise. From the tilted angle of her hair, I couldn't glimpse anything from her delicate nose down. When her head flopped to the other side, her hair fell away. My breath caught as it revealed her terse, pale mouth. Her lips were faded, in result of how tightly she'd restricted them. I was relieved when she suddenly bit them, restoring color as they relaxed. The light from the window dimly glinted on her hair, which was glistening slightly with either sweat or tears. Her already dark hair made it difficult to tell. Her hair didn't stop on top of her bruised shoulder, either. It cascaded like tears, leaving heavy shadows to slow dance upon the closed cover of a spiral notebook on her lap. A plain spiral notebook, appeared slightly faded, but not untidy, as if it were once brand new but forgotten until this very day. The spiral created a contrastingly vivid green gel pen. The little amount of bold fluid that remained displaying proudly through the straw-like end boasted of how much the girl favored the use of it. The colors of her clothes were remarkably plain in contrast to her beloved pen. She was wearing a burgundy and cream-striped sweater, with gold-brown corduroy pants and tennis shoes, a dark blue jean color. Her clothes were neat. Something about her inside them appeared out of place, lost within them. Then I saw it had nothing to do with the clothes. She was sickly. Even the details considered separately were troubling, but when combined, the picture was too strikingly painful. I couldn't ignore it. Couldn't stop myself from staring, and her notebook slid off her lap slowly. I was startled when it fell suddenly on the floor. I tensed, expecting this sound to stir her awake, but it didn't. I watched as the notebook slid over to me, brushed it off quietly, deciding to wait until she awoke to return it to her. After a little while, she awoke, lifting her head, and her eyes met mine instantly. Before I could feel embarrassment because she caught me staring, I noticed the way she softened when she looked at me. She wasn't threatened by me. In fact, there was a peace that overcame her and smoothed over every bit of fragility and anxiety I'd witnessed in her merely minutes before she awoke. I saw it replaced by hope, and the look she gave me was one of trust. I didn't understand how she could accept me that fast without having ever spoken to me, without having seen me. I crossed over to an empty seat beside her and explained how her book fell and slid over to my seat while she was asleep. The way she guarded her notebook when she was sleeping, I assumed she'd be in panic without it when she awoke, but she didn't even seem surprised and calmly said thank you. Then I felt something overtaking her calm. It wasn't recognition. It was surprise, which then subsided to become determination. On the outside, she appeared perfectly calm. I smiled, uncertain of what to expect next. "I'm Drew," I said, holding out my hand, which she shook, with a look of contemplation on her face. Instead of telling me her own name, Natasha, as I now know her, asked me where I was headed. I recall the way she laughed when I admitted I didn't even know yet. She laughed with a look of surprise, which mixed with fear as she quickly ceased laughing. It was as if she thought I'd scold her for laughing. Then she gave me a closed-mouthed smile. She was still trying to hold back as she pointed down at the college hoodie I was wearing. "The truth is, this is just my disguise. I don't know where I'm going. I just needed to get away from where I was." I saw in her face then a look of recognition. I thought she was running away, and her reaction told me she was. I considered telling her everything in that instant. I was even opening my mouth to say it, but I knew she'd think I was making fun of her, because she'd think I was making it up. I wish I were. I left because everything I thought I knew about my life, where I lived, changed. Now I'm looking for a better change. I don't know yet where that will be or what it'll mean. "I'm sorry. The same. Except I knew things were bad all along. I just got sick of it. So very sick of it." I knew she might get upset if I put my arm around her, but I just wanted to hold her and stroke her hair, and if she needed to cry, she could cry on me. And I knew if she wanted to cry, she wouldn't in front of me unless I showed her it was okay. So unless that little thought I had that she'd push me away, close herself up, never talking to me again, I did. I held her. At first she tensed, but after a while she hesitantly wrapped her arms around me very slowly, very cautiously, as though it were a trick. She cried soundlessly into me. The strange thing was, as she cried, instead of feeling a burden from her sift and settle into me, it felt like her tears dissolved, and in being open to her I acted as a shield, and I could feel her fears and tears float like vapor and fly away. I wanted to sing her the lullaby then, the lullaby my mom, Jade, taught me when I was a child. I had felt pain before, and longing, depression. I'd felt others' emotions countless times before, and yet this girl's intense suffering was like every crowd I ever calmed combined. When she pulled away, wiping her eyes, she wouldn't look at me, and her face was flushed. Somehow, even with so much color in her face, she still appeared waxen pale. What struck me, though, was how she apologized to me for crying. Not once, but several times. Whispery for hours, she wouldn't glance up at me. I knew her spirits had lifted, but she was afraid to reveal how she felt. She was so ashamed of crying on me. I reassured her nothing was wrong, and it was okay for her to cry if she needed to. I told her with a gentleness that far exceeded any empathy I've ever had for any strangers who'd ever come to hear the lullaby and be cured, that she would never need to be shy about her emotions or ashamed of them, and that when she was ready she could free herself of her burdens, sharing it with me. One of the most positive things about my gift is that I can tell when my words are making a difference. In the next few moments I felt the effects my words had on her. She was filled with peace, and I felt her disquieted spirit untangle and release. On the outside she appeared to be unsettled, but the tension was gone. She stopped apologizing to me for her tears. I didn't have any plans to leave her. We'd only met hours before the train stopped. I stood to leave, but I turned around when I sensed she was still sitting. There were tears in her eyes again. She blinked, looking away from me, as if she couldn't hide, and walked off the train with me. A few minutes after being off the train, I thought she was still beside me, but I heard footsteps pounding the road behind me, so I turned to look, and there she was, panting. Between rasps, she said, "I have an idea. Let's travel together." "Of course we can travel together. I thought we already were. It unsettles me to think of you traveling by yourself." She was still catching her breath, and we walked together in silence until she could speak again. "You could be my older brother. I mean, if someone asks." I couldn't be offended that she would consider me as an older brother. All it meant was that the disguise was working. Still, I couldn't help but wonder how much older I appeared than I did. A few days ago, and my best friend Duncan turned out to be a genie. He can also change himself into a creature with wings, griffin-like, but with a panther's body instead of a lion's. He has green panther's eyes instead of bird's eyes, with the horns and ears of an antelope. His wings are somewhere between navy blue and forest green. His beak is dark brown. He's strong, but doesn't exactly appear threatening. He disguised me so I could travel safely alone. Maybe Natasha trusts me because I look older, like I could protect her and myself. I wonder if she'd still depend on me if she knew I'm really her age. You would think me being older, in fact, might scare her away, but she's not afraid. So maybe I'm wrong, and she senses my true age, but maybe that's why she's okay with me. I wasn't sure what I should say, so I just smiled. She smiled back and said, "You're a nice person. I think I could trust you. You're just running somewhere, like me." She shouldn't be alone, but then neither should I. For that moment, looking at her still swollen from crying eyes, I saw more than a girl who was lost without a clue of where to go. I saw a girl who had the courage to set out and bring about change in her, improvement in her life, a girl wise enough to understand not to let pride gained in independence keep her from asking for help when she needed it. Who could miss the value in her? Who would ever let her go? It enraged me to think, who could possibly cause pain to this fragile, petal-like princess? I know that my thoughts appear scattered here, but these thoughts I've just described are all the thoughts that channeled through me as we made our way to the next train, picking a new destination by random, going up and buying the tickets. Everything felt cloudy and dim next to the thoughts and concern I had for her. I only say had here because now I don't worry as much for her. I watched her grow bolder with each passing day, and she has the right to feel proud of herself as I feel proud of her. But there we were, having finally made it onto the next train, and I don't know if she could tell I was so deep in thought, but it certainly startled me out of my thoughts when she pointed down at something she just scribbled down in her notebook. I might easily have read it slowly and ruminated over it too, but the way a flood of uneasiness flowed over her got my full attention. Like you, I also have a secret. I believe the right time will come for us to comfortably tell each other what's on our minds, but let's put it behind us for now. We may not be running for the same reasons, but I don't want what we're both running from to isolate us. We could really become like siblings, and I don't want things to do with our respective pasts to drift us apart. Is that all right with you? Her sorrow mingled with restlessness, and she fidgeted, looking at the floor without looking at the floor. I reached for the pen. I'll wait until you're ready to tell me about your past. Just know that that amount of pain isn't forgotten until you can learn from it. Your memories are yours, and only there are lessons you can gain from it that are maybe completely different from the lessons I'll learn. That doesn't mean you have to go through it alone. I understand if it's too painful for you to consider telling about it now, but we can get through it together. You can tell me anything. When I was finished writing my reply, I thought she would be more worried, possibly reconsider choosing me as a traveling companion, but I felt her nervousness lift as I watched her read it. Her smile was incredulous, almost all of it cheerful, except that she let it dim sometimes, as if she were questioning my motives for caring about her. I guess it did seem strange that I would feel such a strong connection with her the day we met, or that I was even being so kind to a complete stranger. Then again, she didn't know how often I connect with people because of my gift, which she also knows nothing about. I never felt this amount of connectedness before her, though. I could feel her enthusiasm as she quickly wrote underneath what I'd written. I don't know where I would be right now if I hadn't met you. I guess neither of us know where we're headed. But just in the few hours I've spent with you, I already can sense you're the best choice I could have made. Thank you. I also have a good feeling about this. One thing I'm absolutely certain of, we weren't meant to travel by ourselves. We were meant to find each other. Then she laughed from pure joy, and it was melodic, but it startled everyone else. Almost as soon as it began flowing freely, she damned it. I wrote to her, "Don't let anyone keep you from being happy." As I tried to fall asleep that night, something happened in my dreams that had never happened before. Her emotions overlapped into it. I attempted to incorporate my lullaby into it, in essence dreaming of the lullaby, but it didn't seem to be working. It wasn't easing her anxiety or the pain found in her night, deciding to sing her the lullaby. From the moment I saw you, my gentle little dear, oh dear, I'll never see another thing the same way again. If you reach out for my hand, it will always be there for you to grab. And I don't know how long we have, but when I'm with you, my love, the hands of time are starting back, and you're the one I'm thinking of. Good night, my little one. That time, every word felt more meaningful than any other time before. When I sang the line about time starting back, my disguise fell away. I was startled by it at first. Hearing my voice get younger and higher pitched scared me for a moment until I caught a glimpse outside the window. It was just my winged panther genie friend Duncan, his green feathers reflecting the moonlight like rippling waves in the wind. He hovered for a moment, just long enough to bow his head to me, as if to reassure me he was just using his powers. He told me later the power of the lullaby can't work while I'm using the disguise. The power from the lullaby comes from within, so I'm being myself when I'm singing it. The power used for the disguise, however, is supplied entirely by Duncan himself. When I was finished singing, Duncan winked, then flew away. I felt the disguise reattached to me, and most importantly, I felt her fears fly away. Does anyone around here happen to have the name Teresa? My daughter. Okay, well, a young lady came to my house and asked me to deliver this to Teresa. Thank you for delivering it. It was nice to meet you. If you ever want to go walking, I walk every morning around this time. Wasn't a problem. Nice meeting you. See you later. Bye. Dear Teresa, you and your family are the best example of a family I've ever seen. When I'm with you, it feels like I always imagined it would be like to have a sister. I haven't gone on a vacation with my family. My mom was simply hinting to me they wanted to move away again. The time you woke me from a nightmare, it was about my parents turning into dragons. This isn't the first time I've regretted not telling a best friend what's really going on in my life. If I choose to go with them, this would be the last time you'd ever hear from me. But if you're reading this, congratulate me. I'm free. I planned ahead, I've outsmarted them, and I'll contact you the next time I can to let you know I'm safe. Love, Natasha. It's daytime, and right now I'm sitting with Drew. I don't know if this is the 5th or 6th train we've been traveling on. It might even be more than that by now. There's something so freeing about losing count, though. I'm showing him the first draft of the letter I wrote to Teresa. I admit I was scared and had to rewrite it until my fingers stopped shaking. Watching those words form, coming from my own hands, felt irreversible. As irreversible as telling him right now, but it's so freeing telling him about it. Like a dare. His remark sounds more like a statement than a question. He appears to be watching my words form. I hold back from answering him. It's almost frightening sometimes how right he is. It feels as though he's always known me, and I just never unnoticed him. Telling him anything about me feels like a dare. It's like a game where I have to choose my words carefully so we can make it to the next train together. As if the more I tell him, the longer it will be before we'll have to part. I know I'll never forget him. The problem is that every train we're on threatens to be our last together. I never wanted to part ways with Teresa, but with Drew, and it feels insanely soon for me to feel this way, yet time with him has become so precious to me. I can't imagine going on as if I never knew him. Taking me by surprise, his eyes find the floor. He looks upset somehow, as if he's absorbed my emotions, which sounds crazy and not at all possible. Or is it? Maybe I've just waited a beat too long to answer him. The feeling was freeing and thrilling, but I had been afraid that at some point I would change my mind and stay. He looks up into my eyes, and I almost lose what I'm saying or thinking about. That is, afraid I'd change my mind and stay with my parents. What am I even saying? Why can't I think when he looks that way into my eyes? An amused smile has formed on his lips as I continue. Before I started writing the letter, I threw out the erasers and whiteout. Now he's smiling so much I'm expecting laughter at any moment. Instead, he says, "Well, the experience has changed you then. I can't picture you doing that now." I'm puzzled. How do I reply to that? I don't even know if I agree with him. Still smiling, he continues, "You're stronger than you were. I mean, now that you've finally opened up with me." I chose to travel with him originally because I was trying not to go into shock being alone. The empowerment I felt, which prompted me to get to the station on my own, left me as soon as I was seated on the train. It doesn't end there. The train I met you on, well, while you slept through the first stop. Wait, you were watching me sleep before we met? Should I just pretend I never said that? Too late, I'm blushing. I can't hide the truth from him anyway. Well, yes, but I'll get to that. I just dug myself deeper, and I know it. He knows it. I'm waiting. Yes, if it were anyone else, that would irk me or frazzle me, but I just smile back. As you were sleeping, an elderly passenger dropped a small battered coin purse on my lap as he strode past. He was on his way off the train, and I stood hoping I could catch up with him, but before I took even one step after him, he stopped. He turned with a smile and an almost apologetic wink. Then the people rushing to get off the train blocked him so thoroughly I could no longer see him. I was so bewildered by what happened I even forgot my plan to get off at that stop. I didn't even know what to make of it, or the little coin purse. Inside it I found a curled-up fortune. Keep the change. Every time you make a purchase, spend every dime. Tell them to keep the change and not a cent you'll lose. On the back were 8 numbers scrunched together. This wasn't written with any pen or pencil. It was printed, again, like a fortune from a fortune cookie. It works, too. I never believed magic existed before this. Every time I go to pay for anything, I empty it. I give it all. It's always slightly more than the price of whatever I'm buying. I tell them to keep the change every time. I think, well, there will be no more. It's run out. The crazy part is, It empties, then refills whenever I need to buy something. I'm handing him the coin purse, even though he couldn't possibly believe me. But I watch him gently uncurl the fortune, turning it over and over again in his hands like he's trying to crack some hidden message. I feel the need to say something that makes sense and distract him in case he tries to convince me it's a fake, that I was cheated somehow. Or he'll assume I'm tricking him, but I'm not. Finally, looking up at me, he says, "I believe you." It looks like he's about to say more, but he stops. I can't hold my smile back, but where was I? Oh, after the coin purse. When I looked up from my coin purse, I saw that just about everyone who had been on the train was no longer there. Everyone but you. You who'd been asleep when I got on the train, and still you were asleep. I found myself watching you, wondering about you. Soon it was like the more I watched you, the more irresistible sleep was. Forgive me if that disturbs you. It's like I couldn't help myself. It's also like I can't stop myself now from telling you either, but I really should stop. I don't know what might come out next. I'm sure I'm blushing, but I'm somehow unable to keep this information locked up anymore. I would stop there, but he isn't laughing at me or acting disinterested. He understands me. The way he listens so intently, I know I have no reason to be ashamed. I've never felt as serene as I am when I'm with you. I'm happy to hear that. I was worried for you before we met. I hope this won't hurt you to hear, because I think you've come a long way from what I saw in you that first day. You looked as though someone had nearly succeeded in breaking your spirit, but you made it. It hurt to see you like that, but you were impossible for me to ignore. You might never tell me about the person or persons who hurt you, but all I wanted was to stop them in their tracks. I knew nothing about you, and yet I could kill whoever hurt you. I'm afraid he'll be able to tell how much that means to me. I know how cliché this might sound, but I'm beaming. He's holding my hand, and I'm so unaccustomed to feeling so wonderful with anyone. I'm afraid it'll end, yet I don't know how much I can take. I don't know how I haven't burst into happy, embarrassing giggles by now. I just can't swallow my joy or my smile, not with him holding my hand. Is this really what it's like to have a brother? I don't know where this conversation is going, and I feel as though I must change the subject, if only so I can gain control over my nerves. Why am I nervous? I take a breath and ask a question that's been plaguing me for a while. How long have we been traveling together? We've been traveling 3 weeks. That's all? It feels like everything is slowed. I know. How do I appear to you? Why do you ask? Am I what you expected I'd be like before we met? You appear on the outside just as your presence really is. That could mean anything. I'll try again. You were alone, but you didn't look lonely, and I hope this won't upset you. You appear younger when you're asleep. You looked sweet, not too serious, not too mischievous. I hoped you'd be as nice as you looked. I don't just mean you're nice to look at. You're a nice guy. That doesn't offend me one bit. Do you wish I were younger? I like you as you are. That's good to know. I think you're adorable. Right now, Natasha's asleep and she's resting well. I always try to stay awake when she dreams in case she has nightmares. Lately, she's had less and less. It seems the further away from the one or ones who hurt her, the better. That is, if we really are traveling further away. Like Natasha, I too can't believe it's been 3 weeks. It has to have been more than 3 weeks by now. Duncan's playing with the time. I'm almost completely positive he is. He did promise me he'd keep a close eye on me when he gave me my disguise. I distinctly remember the twinkle in his eye when he told me not to worry about the address of the house I'd be traveling to, the address of my long-lost home, promising he'd reveal the exact location when the time was right. He disguised himself to give Natasha that coin purse. I know because of the back of the fortune. Those aren't just numbers. The first 4 numbers make up the year my mom and I were taken from my home. The last 4 numbers have to be the house number. I was so stunned by the realization I almost told Natasha everything. He promised he'd tell me the address at the right time. I'm positive that's part of it, which means he's also set me and Natasha up with each other. He knows me well, but I don't think mind reading is one of his talents, so I don't know how he could have known how drawn to her I'd be. In a way, I'm glad she doesn't know about my gift. It would embarrass her if she knew I can tell more from her emotions and actions than she's ready to admit. She's falling in love with me. That's another reason it couldn't just be 3 weeks ago we met. She wouldn't fall in love with me so soon, would she? But right now, I can feel myself falling asleep. Now I'm asleep, and I'm looking down upon ruins, dirt, dust, and scorched ground. And in the middle, there's something. It's getting clearer. I'll see it soon. It's now noon, but I know I'm dreaming. I'm alone. The dragons lost interest and floated away. I'm shivering. Their fire hurt me, but now that all and any trace of warmth there had been has passed along with them. I'm in pieces, yet I have to remind myself it's their fault I'm laying here. There, it's closer. I can't tell what it is, but it's frozen, as I am also frozen in space and time. It blinks at me as I approach. Glint is too tame a word how it reacts to the light. As I draw near, it winks at me. I'm surprised to find there's already more slush than ice. As I touch it, I watch the remaining ice crack crisply and puddle down, feeling warmth again, but I can't see the source. More layers. The next one appears fossilized, but breaks away thin as eggshell. Under that I find a mix of mud and ash. Then, when my eyes open, I'm awake now. I expect sunlight, but instead I've found down. I'm struck, spellbound, that first I didn't drown when I hit water cool instead of ground. The very impact of my fall breaks the bark, which turned out to be the last layer of all. All I feel is warmth when I turn my head, warmth on my ear, my hair, soft, sweet breath, life. The next thing I feel when smooth, mossy green touches me with the lightest kiss. I'm kissing Drew. His breath slowly flows into me like a breeze as I taste his lips, filling me with warmth. Fast, like lightning fast, I feel a surge in my nerves. As the revelation hits me, even if he never knows about my kiss, I'll never see him the same way. Now my shooting star to wish upon Drew is constant light and warmth here with me. He is the sun. I feel blind when I open my eyes, then to see a winged creature just behind him at the window. I blink, startled. It winks. I blink again. It's no longer there. I laugh, uncertain what just happened. Did we just pass a tree that looked like a green and black griffin? Drew is now awake. I would tell him about what I just saw, but how could I mention that without mentioning the kiss I gave him? Not long after Drew woke up, the train stopped, and we found a nice sandwich shop to eat at. As we were eating, I couldn't seem to shake an impending feeling I still have that we'll part ways soon. It's so strange being around him now, ever since that kiss. I don't know if it's better or worse that he might never know about it. Maybe ever trying to see him as a brother was a mistake, because now it's like everything has changed. The surroundings are more or less familiar, but something is different now, about us. With him, my future's already taken a different turn. And I'm not ready to contemplate where life will lead when we finally part ways. I'll never forget the difference he's made in my life already. And I'm jealous of anyone he'd replace me with. I feel too close to drift apart from him now. When he plays around, I know he's trying to make every moment we have last. I wish reality didn't have to set in. I wish we could go on like this, without ever having to say goodbye. The next stop is our last together. Today she was in a restroom in a sandwich shop. I bought us 2 cheap phones. It doesn't feel like it's enough, but I'm not ready to lose her forever. Just a little while longer. I want to keep her smiling. I want to keep hearing that shy laugh. I just can't help myself from wondering if her kiss would really taste as good as it did in my dream. It felt so real. I can't walk out of her life forever, leaving everything about what could be to the imagination. I plan to kiss her when we say goodbye. I know that's corny, but it might be the only time I could get away with it. Or I could go ahead and give her the phone. She's writing something describing the scenery flying past the window. Natasha? Somehow seeing her eyes brighten as she looks into mine expectantly makes me feel weak. She trusts me, and now that it's all going so well, it's ending? Is this fair of me? I got you a present. I try to smile. I unzip my backpack and find the bag. One for me and one for you. I can almost see her heart sink into her eyes. I definitely feel it. She tries to cover her emotions with a smile. Then her eyes look past mine, not out of shame or any sort of unease, but something completely unrelated. I look, and a young child runs happily past us in the aisle. His parents scramble out of their seats after him, apologetic looks on their faces. What happens next gives me an idea. Before his parents can reach him, he falls down in the aisle. Here's what gets me. His shoelaces are tied, so he didn't trip on them, nor was there anything in his way. It's one of those accidents so seemingly unprovoked you could rewind a tape of it again and again, still unable to see what caused it. I wouldn't go so far as to say it was a freak accident, but it was unique enough to be recognized again. I'm not sure how, but I knew at that moment one way to tell once and for all if Duncan really is putting the train on a time loop. Only allowing Natasha and I to move forward? Yes, it's a wonderful excuse to kiss her, too. It's impulsive, but I couldn't possibly go wrong. The palm of her hand becomes sweaty as I hold it. I know she's nervous, and I can feel the excitement as I look in her eyes. The boy crying in the aisle and his parents coo over them feel misplaced. I feel removed from it as I lean in, putting my arms around her. She understands I'm about to kiss her, and I feel a rise of hope, longing, welling up inside of her. She means so much to me, and I don't want this to pass fast like it never happened. That might be why it felt like it took hours for me to reach her lips, but wow, I'm there. It's thrilling how exactly the same it felt in my dream, except now it's even better because I can kiss her back. In my dream, I must have been too surprised by finding her buried like a treasure beneath everything to kiss her back. I didn't think it was possible to feel her emotions. They've coursed through me since the day we met, any more powerfully than I already do, but when our lips connect, her breath translates for me all the things she's left unsaid. Her emotions don't simply mix. They rush, they swirl, they swish together. I can practically taste how concentrated, how deep her emotions are. I can't believe this. It's incredible. And her breathing has quickened. I've upset the balance. The thin line between tasting her kiss and drinking her in. Too much at once, as if to say I'm sorry. I ease back, and the waters of her soul have calmed. It's not over yet, though. Every contact of my lips on hers sends ripples of emotions through her. I realize that, in a sense, she too feels my emotions through my motions. It takes almost everything for me to hold back as I'm gently running my fingers along her arms and all those goosebumps, feeling the reaction of my touch on her skin, her flushed cheeks, her goosebumps. As if blushing is contagious, I feel my ears begin to burn. Blushing because, of course, we're not alone, but I shouldn't be worried because it's suspiciously quiet. Duncan has paused time just for us, but that's right, this was a test. Sure enough, as soon as I've stopped kissing her, I hear that distinct sound of a child who fell and is crying again. I shouldn't even say again, because only Natasha and I are aware of it having happened once before. To everyone else, it comes as a total surprise. I pick up the phone I dropped earlier trying to hand her when she got distracted by the boy, and hand it to her. The joy of having just kissed her and knowing Duncan set us up together has me so relieved. I can't stop laughing. I'm relieved because this means I might not have to say goodbye to her after all. Duncan knows that by now. I can't leave her. There's still a chance she might choose to go on without me, but right now, I hope she'll stay. One for me, one for you, Drew said 3 hours ago. Drew said 3 hours ago, and he handed me a cell phone he bought. We were distracted by a little boy who ran past us in that instant. The kid tripped and fell. His parents tried to stop it. I had a hard time feeling sorry for the boy, though, because his parents held him, stroked his hair, murmuring how it would be all right. And it will. He'll have a wonderful life with parents like that. Instead of feeling jealous because I was never treated that way by my parents, like I felt in the past, I feel respect and admiration for these absolute strangers. That's the one thing that's changed about me. I'm not bitter or cynical anymore. I see parents like these every day now, and not only do these kinds of scenes give me hope, but it inspires me. I'm certainly not ready to have children of my own, but I would want to treat any future children I might have the way I've seen some precious mothers treat their children. Not only that, but I've seen so many beautiful couples. I no longer fear falling in love. If I were still afraid of it, I'd just be in denial, because I'm certain I love Drew. Which reminds me of why writing about this is significant in the first place. You'll never believe what happened next. So there I was, thinking about all that, sweet families, strong love relationships, thinking how much I loved Drew and want to kiss him, when he looked at me as if knowing exactly what I was thinking. He locked his fingers with mine, not taking his eyes off me, pulling me towards him, And he kissed me. At first it startled me. I had kissed him while he was asleep. I wasn't used to the feeling of him kissing back or the feelings that it aroused. He must have sensed it because he started kissing me slower, though still just as desperately. His hands caressed me, giving me chills, but it felt wonderful, and I don't know how, but the phone hit the floor. I know it did, but it no longer mattered. Then a child began to cry. We stopped self-consciously, and when we turned to look, it was the same child in the same place as before. It was as if nothing had happened. The rapidity of his breathing, the way he blushed, even the awkward way he picked the phone up from the floor, handed it to me, all were telling signs that I hadn't only imagined it. It's impossible, but we kissed. And no one but us knew. Suddenly he started laughing so hard and I laughed with him. For a moment it didn't matter when we'd leave, because we had now, and all we needed was what the present tense offered us. It was like being set free from the burdens and restrictions of time. I don't think my heart had ever beat as fast as it did then. I no longer had any doubt that the time I'd kissed him really happened, because kissing him back felt exactly the same. I still can't believe we kissed 3 hours ago. The only thing is, it was awkward afterwards, and we were silent until we got off at the last stop. We never had discussed when we'd leave or saying goodbye, but the fact that he gave me the phone felt final. I could kick myself for being the first to say I'd stay at a hotel tonight, so I'd leave in the morning instead of waiting with him for the next train. With a smile that looked forced, he said, "I could help you get the room, but they might not think you're old enough to get one by yourself." "How did you know I'm not an adult?" And I blushed more when he responded, "Even if you're 18, you look younger." "I'm 16. "You don't have to worry about sleeping in the same room. I'll get my own." "Okay." "Call me when you plan to leave and I'll see you off." I wish I could say he kissed me good night, but he didn't. He did hug me, though, and it felt as though we were the same. Weird, I know, but it felt like if we broke apart, we'd break each other. I don't know how long I've been laying here awake. It's like I can't sleep without him, which sounds all wrong. Even worse and very wrong. I want to call him and invite him back to my room. Now there's a sound coming from my window, like a bird pecking, but stronger.
Swoosh! Where were you going, kid?
Duncan, why did you...
We'll have to get her back indoors so she doesn't freeze out here. Come on, I'll take you kids back.
Okay, you know that starting phrase, "never in my wildest dreams"? I would start off this entry saying that I'd never believe this were happening in my wildest dreams, except I don't know if it's really happening. The creature I thought I saw the first time I kissed Drew? Well, he broke into my hotel room, apologized for breaking the window in words I could comprehend, and said,
Come on, let's find that boy.
Before I could protest, he scooped me up onto his back and swooped out the window. We found
that boy.
Drew, walking around in the cold, and now if I'm not hallucinating, Drew and I had been flown back into my hotel room through the broken window. Right now, Drew and Duncan, who I should mention is now a genie, are having an argument. I'm writing it all down as I wait for it to make sense. Also, if this entry is still here tomorrow morning when I go to check for its existence, I'll know I'm not losing my mind. Then again, I have a magic coin purse, which I acquired the day I met Drew. The first time I saw this griffin-like creature, I had just kissed Drew. On the same day, I showed him the coin purse, and he believed me. When Drew kissed me, time repeated itself. These are all related to Drew. If I call him tomorrow and he doesn't show up, I'll have to assume that I'm not only crazy, but Drew is my imaginary friend. Please, please be real.
Why don't you tell her?
Duncan, how am I going to explain everything to her by myself? I'm Clara, Drew's mother. It's nice to meet you. I wasn't always this way. Since I have even more information about the story than Duncan, I think it's fair that I start, unless anyone minds. When Drew was a very young child, he got sick very often. I typically became sick with him, and my Jim, Drew's father, would always take care of us both with such tenderness and love. Whenever I felt weak, he knew immediately. and always knew how to make me feel a little bit better. He begged me to let him take me to see a doctor about it, even though I told him I'd always acquired colds easily. I couldn't convince him it was no big deal, so I finally relented. I found out I had an autoimmune disorder, and it was hereditary. When I learned that Drew was sick all the time from something I passed on to him, I got even weaker, and only Jim's gentle words of assurance could chase the self-loathing and depression from my mind. We had some moments of peace, where we would get well for a time. On a particularly good night, Jim rushed through the door and announced, between ecstatic kisses, he'd just discovered something sure to cure me and Drew. I remember how frightened I was, fearing that in his attempts to rescue me and Drew, his mental health had suffered. He presented me with a flyer which boasted about a festival to begin that weekend. I thought I understood the intentions behind it, believing that Jim was implying that time spent having fun at a festival would lift our moods, thereby building our immunity. My doubts in his sanity had dissipated, and I flung my arms around my overly optimistic hero, but he laughed and said I hadn't even got to the good part. I turned the flyer around. If there were something important to be gained from it, I certainly didn't find it. Jim laughed again, telling me it was on the front. Eyeing him suspiciously, at the time considering once more that he might have gone crazy, I turned this paper back around to the front. I still didn't see what he could have been hinting at until he pointed right at it, and I had to reread it, almost unwilling to believe it was real. It said, "Stop by our most popular showcase, our Nightingale and Innocence Choir, made up of children, teens, and exotic birds. Our choirs sing forgotten melodies from ancient cultures. The songs were powerful enough to permanently cure sickness and set your soul at ease. It will lift your spirit in an unforgettable way." Oh, how my spirits were lifted just at the thought of it. He told me he'd already paid for our tickets as soon as he found out, but if he'd gotten there 3 minutes late, I wouldn't have been able to go through. He explained that there were only 2 tickets left. Jim wouldn't be able to go. I wonder sometimes how things might have been different if Jim had been able to go with us that night. Any and all doubt I'd been trying not to show evaporated when Drew and I made our way to the singing curing choir. As the youth sang alongside the amazing birds, it felt as though a seed I didn't know had been buried within me was being warmed and nourished by the atmosphere and impact of their voices. It was exactly like a seed being encouraged to grow and blossom within me. A smile I'd recently feared I'd never see again beamed up at me from Drew. If you could have asked me that night what my thoughts were, I could have filled whole days with words of overflowing love for the place, and for my Jim for giving us the tickets in the first place. I was still thinking about it, in fact, on the night Duncan and his wife, Jade, broke into my house.
My wife and I were in control of everything at the festival, and the night Claire and Drew came to the festival was a special night. It was Jade's 201st birthday. I had promised her anything she wanted. She looked out that night into the crowd, and laid her eyes on the most beautiful child she'd ever seen. She wanted Drew. I sent one of our nightingales to follow the boy and his mother home. A day later, we were already on our way to a new town, and the nightingale had to catch up with us. The nightingale came back and told us exactly where they lived. We couldn't cancel our next events for the week, so we had to wait for the next free day available to us, a week away. My wife was irritable all week. She was so impatient to leave, I was afraid she'd leave without me. She talked about the boy every night, until we could make it there. I thought the plan was just to go there, see the boy again, and leave, but I was starting to see that wouldn't be enough for her. When we finally made it to the house the boy lived in, Jade told me she wanted to go into the house, to make sure it was the right place. She didn't want to see the boy through a window. She wanted to be near him. As we entered the house, we heard a beautiful lullaby and followed the sound to the boy's room. We had to get their attention. It seemed as though Clara didn't even notice us, even though it looked like she looked directly at us. Once.
I saw them, but I didn't react because I thought I was just exhausted or imagining they were there. Drew had been asleep, but he bolted up and asked me why there were strange animals in his room. He asked me, were they going to sing him to sleep tonight? I was actually about to remind him I just sang him to sleep when I realized those strange creatures must have been real and turned back time a few minutes before I sang to him. Only then did I know they were real.
Seeing that we got her attention, we clapped our hands, and he was back to being unaware of us, sound asleep. We reverted to a less threatening, human-like appearance. Jade went over to the boy's bedside, and I saw a look of panic in his mother's eyes. I explained to her that my wife was fascinated with her son so much because she was unable to have children of her own.
It was terrifying to watch this thing, which looked like a person but moments before looked anything but human, hover over my sleeping child. There was one thing which held me back from keeping her away. It was a longing look of absolute devotion in her eyes, which I recognized as she watched Drew sleep. The look that says you'd sacrifice anything just to hold and protect a child as your own. It was unmistakably the look of motherhood, even though he wasn't her own. We had the same eyes for Drew, though you couldn't say they resembled each other in shape or form. At the time, though I had been feeling much improved since the night we went to the festival, Drew also seemed to be feeling a lot better. I still doubted we'd been cured completely. Don't take my son. He's very ill, and I am too, I told her, and Duncan told me we were both cured when we went to hear the choir sing. But he's my baby. He can't live away or apart from me. The one standing by his side kept her eyes on Drew as she said to me, "You could be valuable to us. You have an enchanting lullaby you could teach us for the choir, and it would benefit others as well as yourself. You could go with us to teach us how to raise him." I had to think fast because Jim was on his way home, and I didn't want him to become involved in it. Only if you allow me to be close to him at all times, and if you permit me to sing to him every night.
At Jade's request, we made a quick arrangement. During the day, my wife would be transformed into Clara, while Clara would be transformed into a nightingale. Collectively, Jade and I would use our powers to enhance Drew's voice so he could sing with the other children in the choir. The way that the choir works with children and nightingales, we charm the birds into perching politely on the children's shoulders, so the birds would be well behaved. Clara wouldn't need to be charmed to sit on Drew's shoulder. At night, Jade would be my wife again, and Clara would sing her lullaby to Drew.
I only agreed to the arrangement because otherwise they'd take Drew. I couldn't bear life without him, namely, a life lived left to wonder where he was, if he was safe. Someday we'd escape and make our way back to Jim. I wasn't happy at all with it, but little by little feelings of sympathy grew towards Jade. She'd never know what it was like to really say any child was truly hers. She treated me very well for a while, too, but her smile was less out of shared happiness than it was out of guilt. Still, we became as close as sisters. Like the worst kind of sibling rivalry, though, she eventually turned on me.
Jade became restless. She was envious of Clara for the little bit of time she was given to be there for her son. With the rage of a black widow, Jade would come to me every night. My words and whispers of affection weren't enough to quiet her anymore. If only I could claim I didn't finally give in to her pleas, but I did as she wished. I got Clara to teach Jade how to sing the lullaby. Clara didn't even have to ask me what was next. She'd guessed already where it was going. The irony of how I always told Jade no one could take her place, never realizing she'd ever want to take someone else's.
I began having dreams about the way it had been before, and started asking about my father, Jim. Jade, who'd never heard of him before my mentioning of him, denied things furiously. I couldn't understand why, but I was too afraid to ask any more about it when she reacted the way she did. Then something unexpected happened, and I was always really intuitive, but a power developed within me. I began to not only understand others, but pick up on what others were feeling around me. I discovered it one day in the choir. The power we have over crowds of people, healing them and leaving them with a sense of peace, has to do with the power Duncan and Jade put on our voices. The power is sent out through our voices, but it's only borrowed power. I was singing and thought I was starting to feel the effects of the song we were singing. As I continued to sing, I realized someone in the crowd was reacting exactly the way I felt. The feeling grew stronger as I watched him. He really felt the power of it all, and I realized it wasn't the song making me feel that way at all. It was feelings. His feelings were passing through me. At the time, I could only feel one person's emotions at a time, and the power within me grew stronger the more I used it. The only time this was ever a bad thing was when I began to see straight through Jade, whom I'd grown to believe was my mother. I only refer to her as Jade because I know the difference between them now. At the time, I believed she was my mother, Clara. I'd never heard of Jade. It was as though she'd become alien to me. She had anger in her eyes behind her smile. When she pretended not to be angry, I knew she was. I began to understand my dreams were memories. But understanding it didn't make it clear why my awake mother and my dream mother had two separate voices. Things became worse with Jade. She locked me up at night in a bird cage, and I only got to be with Drew when I was perched on his shoulder, chortling a language I'd learned from a woman who'd stolen my child and my life. I taught her motherhood, and she abused the privileges she'd taken away from me. I could do nothing about the way she treated my son but watch in horror.
When Jade learned how to sing the lullaby, she wanted to try performing it with Drew, excluding the choir and all nightingales. She wanted to see if a mother and son pair would have more impact on the crowd than the whole choir. During practice, she became so frustrated to hear how much her voice clashed with his, she took it out on him. I had to get between them to keep her from hitting him. As I told her to stop, the name Jade slipped out before I could stop it. Drew followed me around the next week, asking me why I called his mother Jade instead of Clara. At one point I just said, Jade must have come out because she's a jewel, you know? A real gem.
I knew he was trying to hide something, but I started to see he was hiding the truth from me out of fear what she'd do. He had protected me from her, even though he was just as afraid of her as I was.
She didn't love me anymore, if she'd ever loved me. Nothing I could do would make her smile. I wasn't good enough, and she felt no need to keep that to herself. The only things she did in the way of affection had a distinct flavor of greed. She wasn't the person I'd fallen in love with, and she was nothing like Clara. She was becoming her idea of a perfect human woman. She envied pregnant women long before she'd ever laid eyes on Drew and Clara, but it was worse when she was given the freedom to live as a woman.
Not even the body I'd forfeited was good enough for her. She tried to make it hers by getting body piercings, chopping my hair, anything to leave her own mark. One night she told me she'd found a man and he'd give her children. She planned to leave Duncan for him. I wanted to warn Duncan, but she was always around, so I couldn't say anything. Jade never told me when she planned to leave, but it just so happened the day she disappeared was the same day Jim reappeared. It was a hot day, and we were performing in the choir when I noticed Drew had stopped singing. He was in shock over something he was focusing on, and I followed his gaze. Jim was there, crying and shaking. I flew right up to Jim and cooed the melody into his ear. My heart could have broken as I saw the tears well up in his eyes.
I met him after the show and asked if he was Jim, Drew's father. He was shocked, asked how I could possibly know that, and I told him every detail I could remember from the past several years. 10 years, to be exact. He was speechless for several minutes. I think he'd have tried to kill me for taking his family in the first place, if it weren't for the shock, and for the fact I was his only way to be with his wife and son again. He began to tell me everything he'd been through in all those years. He'd assumed the worst for years. He told me he knew it was Clara when he heard her voice, even though it came from the beak of a creature he'd never seen or heard of in his life. The voice he'd longed to hear for years, singing in his ear. It wasn't just a lullaby either. It was undoubtedly the same one he used to come home to every night, lilting and soft, whenever he heard it drift through the cracks of his son's bedroom door. The lullaby had always left a spell on him, as it did once more, 10 years later. After all, a lullaby is a song driven by love, which promises security, and if need be, sacrifice in order to obtain it. For Jim, every time he heard the lullaby, it made him feel as though he were just falling in love with Clara all over again. Hearing it every night was like falling in love with his wife right from the beginning, any time she sang it. I cried with Jim, realizing that I had taken time from a precious young family, and I had taken love in order to prosper from my own relationship. The guilt of what my wife and I had done, and the greed which allowed it to continue, soured my marriage, but also left irreparable damage on their lives, damage I wouldn't have ever factored in. Jade left me a letter that morning telling me about her lover. It was out of my hands, which gave me freedom. Now I had the control, and I could start to make things right again.
After the performance, Drew put me in my cage like it always was. I sat there wanting to die. How could Jim possibly recognize me, and without coming away from the show with the impression that it was some sort of medium act? He would very likely go on with his life, believing that my soul had been reincarnated for a brief moment as a bird, and there was nothing I could do about it. Then I heard someone unlock my cage. I didn't look up to see who it was. I was depressed and very embarrassed. Thinking Duncan was the one who'd opened my cage, I said, "Go away! You ruined my life. You took all I had away just to replace me with a phony version of myself. Sure, she's healthy, but she's not me. Drew is my son, not hers, and that man you might have seen in the crowd used to be my husband. Used to be. Before all this, and he'll probably just walk away with the understanding that a bird flew in his face, sang pretty music, and the experience resurfaced memories of a wife he must think left him as soon as she was cursed, or is buried dead somewhere." I felt hands lifting me out of my cage, and I struggled against them, crying, "Go away!" I kicked against the hands, rebelling against being held. Then I noticed how gentle the hands were holding me. There was one person in the entire world who could care for me so tenderly. Jim. As I began to calm down, he hugged me lightly to his chest and kissed my head. Then all that mattered was the warmth from Jim, the breath I felt floating down upon me, telling me without words, "I would sing you a million lullabies, even if I couldn't carry a tune. I would sing them for you, and every word would be true, but only because it's you. And I'd sing every single one I could think of, till I've messed them all up and forgotten a tune, because I love you. And with any of the dark times, baby, don't cry. Let me sing you a lullaby, baby. Good night." Wow.
Do you recognize it?
I don't know why. From the moment I saw you, my gentle little dear, oh dear, I'll never see another thing the same way again. If you reach out for my hand, it will always be there for you to grab. And I don't know how long we have, but when I'm with you, my love, the hands of time are starting back, and you're the one I'm thinking of. Good night, my little one. Forgive me for writing a past tense again, but I couldn't write while he was singing. He was so mesmerizing. As he sang, he revealed how he felt. Slowly he became shorter, and his face took on a softer look. His hair got shorter too, but it was so strange, so breathtaking. He slowly went back to looking the way he looks, and I realized he was holding my hand when it was over. When I asked how I appeared to you, I was really asking how old I appeared to be. You look 20-something. I'm 16. So am I. The memory of the first time I kissed him and the first time he kissed me come back with a desire so strong. I want so badly to kiss him again, but I can't, not in front of everyone. After all that, Duncan and my parents took turns explaining everything to me as we're doing right now. Duncan told me he had everything planned out. He left the festival in charge of someone he trusts, just in case Jade comes back to the festival and finds information concerning our whereabouts, which I doubt would happen. No one can stand Jade. No one would even let her into the festival. We would all travel to my old house separately. My dad would travel back home by car. Clara would fly above him as a nightingale, but Duncan plans to give her back her human form once we've all made it there. Then I was to travel by train with a disguise. As Duncan disguised me, he told me the details concerning the address would pop up when it was the right time. Part of the address has already, on the fortune in your coin purse.
The coin purse which I gave to you disguised as an older human man. That message in your fortune reminds me. You can keep the change.
That means...
You seem to enjoy your disguise so much. You can keep the change. It's all up to you. Well, now everything is safe for us to travel together the remainder of the way. When we get there, we can turn Clara back into her human form, and when that happens, Jade will be turned into a nightingale, which is fair, I think.
There's room available for her too, at home. Now they're all looking at me, waiting for me to respond. I start laughing because they're dead serious, and I'm so sleepy, and you know what? I'm in my pajamas, and they're asking if I want to travel with them. How do I know this is real? My mind goes back to that dream, the child tripping, the child crying, Drew and I kissing, the same child beginning to cry. How long have we known each other?
I saw trouble following you. I needed someone to keep Drew feeling safe and not alone. You also needed that. You were both running from something, but I didn't have to do it all on my own. You were drawn to each other anyway. I just helped. 3 months. So, Natasha, you can come with us if you like. You could leave tomorrow free to live your life, as though none of this ever happened. You can even take what you've written within these past few months and make it into a story you could sell. But this doesn't have to be the end.
The more they watch for my answer, the harder it is for me to decide. I don't know yet what I want to do. How much time do I have to decide? We'll be waiting. Now it's up to you. I'm going to say goodnight for now, okay? I'm not going anywhere without you, so I have no use for that phone. By traveling to your house together, are we all flying on Duncan's back? We are, except for my mom. She'll fly alongside us. That's so cool. What about suitcases?
They'll also fly alongside us.
That's so cool. Dear Teresa, I'm free, safe, and I've found my kingdom. No dragons can ever haunt me now, in dream or in life. I live like a princess here, and every night I'm lulled to sleep by the sweetest melodies I've ever heard. This is my permanent address now, so you can write me any time you want to and visit me. I've been through things in my life I never told you about, things that could have shattered me, but luckily they only managed to inflict damage upon my emotions and self-esteem. I'm lucky for this because my emotions have repaired. My self-esteem took roots and grew. My whole life has changed and improved for the better. I've also fallen in love with someone who understands me in a way that's unbelievable. I can't begin to describe how wonderful he is to me. He's amazing, and we support each other. Some things you have to see to believe, so I've included a small token of my appreciation for all that you and your family have ever done for me. The instructions are included inside, along with my address, and I wish you good luck. Love, Natasha. P.S. Keep the change. And the letter was sent to Teresa and her family inside a little package box, and inside that was a little coin purse, and inside that was a little curl of paper with an address printed on one side and instructions for using the magic little coin purse on the other side.